Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sensed his end was near. The sharp aches in his chest had intensified over the past few weeks. It was July 6, 1968. He rose that morning, aware it could be his final one, yet he headed to Wells' restaurant regardless. Same spot, same morning meal. The Genovese family had reached out. They sought a discussion on heroin, on Harlem's path ahead, on the chaos following a leader's fall. Bumpy might have remained at home, savoring his remaining moments in tranquility. But instead, he faced off against 3 syndicate toughs and reached a decision: safeguard his enduring influence or preserve his existence. The two paths wouldn't align. He picked Harlem. Strolling Harlem's avenues during the sweltering summer of 1968, you'd witness a spirit fading. Not the structures, not the rhythms, not the residents, but the essence itself. Narcotics were seeping into the alleys like toxic fumes, and all understood the origin. The Italian syndicate, particularly the Genovese outfit. For 3 decades, Bumpy Johnson had barred that toxin from entering. He managed the policy games, oversaw betting operations, maintained harmony among the Irish, Italians, and his community. Yet he held one unbreakable principle: no narcotics in Harlem, not on his turf, not as long as air filled his lungs. But by 1968, Bumpy Johnson's breaths came labored. At 62, his ticker was given out. Physicians at Harlem Hospital had warned him 6 months prior: ease up, step away, make the most of your remaining days. Bumpy had chuckled. Step away? A figure like him didn't fade into obscurity. He perished in action, and should death claim him, it would find him standing tall, not confined to a sterile ward. The Genovese clan understood this trait. They'd observed him closely, biding their time. Vito Genovese himself languished in a federal lockup in Atlanta, succumbing to a cardiac ailment mirroring Bumpy's own. Still, his organization retained clout, remained ravenous, and spotted a chance. Harlem, bereft of Bumpy Johnson, equaled an unguarded territory, a treasure trove ripe for seizure. The fresh recruits, those unfamiliar with the era when Bumpy had entered Lucky Luciano's domain without a weapon in 1935 and emerged unscathed. They figured it straightforward: simply outlast the elder, then encroach, establish drug pipelines, seize the lottery trade, transform Harlem into yet another revenue stream. However, the veteran leaders, those who recalled the tales, grasped the reality. They recognized Bumpy Johnson posed a greater threat in decline than many did at their peak. They understood one couldn't merely stride into Harlem and seize desires, not with Bumpy still drawing breath. Thus, they opted for parley initially. Extend a proposal, invoke his entrepreneurial instincts. After all, he was aged ailing on his way out. Certainly, he'd aim to fortify his kin's prospects. Certainly, he'd seek a final lucrative exit. That July 6, 1968, 3 figures in tailored attire climbed into a sleek black Cadillac in Little Italy and motored northward to Harlem. They were Anthony, Das, quote, Taratri, Lentini, Joseph, quote, 4, Stacy, and a rising enforcer called Paulie Fortunato. They packed heat, they boasted ties, and Joey Surprise clutched a sleek black valise holding $100,000 in bills. They had zero clue they headed toward their own disgrace. Wells' restaurant occupied the junction of 132nd Street and 7th Avenue. It lacked glamour. Crimson vinyl stools polished glossy from years of patrons. Ebony and ivory tiled floors. the aroma of sizzling pork fat and percolating brew that had simmered since sunrise, walls adorned with images of Harlem icons, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Adam Clayton Powell, Jr., and tucked in one nook, a mounted picture of Bumpy Johnson clasping hands with Muhammad Ali. But Wells belonged to Bumpy. His customary seat nestled in the rear alcove, oriented toward the entrance, eternally vigilant at the entrance, a lingering custom from eras when foes burst through portals not bearing deals, but firearms. On that day, Bumpy dined solo. His spouse, Mamie, had pleaded with him to stay put. She'd detected an ominous vibe in the atmosphere, the instinct honed by women bound to perilous lives, sensing peril prior to its strike. Yet Bumpy had pressed a kiss to her brow, adjusted his necktie, and assured her return by midday. He donned formal attire even for dawn repasts. Dignity, he'd declare. He requested his standard fare: fluffy scrambled eggs, crunchy strips of bacon, whole-grain bread, and Joe Sands cream. He scanned the Amsterdam News, Harlem's African-American daily, perusing a piece on the sanitation employees' walkout, when the eatery's entrance swung wide and the trio strode inside. The whole venue hushed, not an abrupt stillness from alarm, but a fading murmur as patrons clocked the unfolding scene. The server, a lady called Dorothy, who'd toiled at Wells for 2 decades, halted her pour midway, her grip quivering faintly, droplets scattering across the surface. Every soul in Harlem grasped the implication of mobster garb in a black enclave. Dealings of the sort that typically spelled misfortune for someone. Bumpy kept his gaze fixed on his paper. He savored a leisurely draw from his mug, flipped the sheet with measured poise, and held steady. He'd anticipated this encounter. Gossip spread swiftly across those realms, and he'd long recognized the Genovese family's intentions. He anticipated they'd dispatch an emissary sooner or later. The timing, however, caught him off guard. Today, of all days. Tony Peels approached initially, the smooth talker and deal-maker, a mid-40s underboss who'd earned his stripes overseeing gambling rackets in the Bronx. Joey Surprise lingered near the entrance, guarding it, his gaze sweeping the diner for any signs of trouble. The sleek black leather case weighed down his grip. Paulie, the kid scarcely out of his early 20s at 25, positioned himself behind Tony, straining to appear tough, as if he truly fit alongside a legend like Bumpy Johnson. "Mr. Johnson," Tony began, his tone polite yet assertive, "do you mind if we join you?" Bumpy set aside his paper with measured slowness, drawing out the moment. He raised his gaze to meet Tony's, those icy, shrewd eyes that had confronted syndicate leaders, corrupt officers, and hitmen over 3 decades without flinching. Eyes that had witnessed deaths and remained unflinching. Finally, he nodded toward the opposite bench. The trio eased into the seating. Dorothy approached, her fingers trembling just a bit, inquiring about coffee. Tony dismissed her with a casual flick, eyes fixed ahead. This wasn't chit-chat, it was negotiation. Silence stretched on. In Wells' eatery, the only noises were the hiss of frying bacon, the murmur of hushed talks from nearby patrons, and the steady tick of the vintage Coca-Cola timepiece on the wall. All eyes in the place were subtly fixed on them, feigning disinterest. Over the road, in a stationary Buick, a pair of Bumpy's crew kept vigil from afar, Big Jack Turner and Raymond Slim Washington. They'd posted up there from 6:30 a.m., nursing stale brews and staying alert. Bumpy didn't venture out unprotected, Not in 1968, not amid rising threats from the avenues, with upstart thugs growing reckless and the established codes crumbling. Tony Peels shattered the quiet. He signaled to Joey's surprise, who advanced from his spot at the door. Joey set the dark leather briefcase down on the surface amid Bumpy and Tony, inches from Bumpy's mug. The sort of case executives toted, the type that transported substantial funds. The metal clasps snapped apart, echoing sharply in the subdued space. Within lay crisp bundles of $100 notes, bound by bank bands. Plenty of them. Genuine currency, right there in plain sight. Alluring. Quote, 10, Tony murmured, dropping to that intimate pitch deal-makers adopt for offers they recognize as shady, yet lucrative. Quote 11. Bumpy ignored the case entirely, neither reaching for it nor peering in. His stare remained pinned on Tony's features. I'm all ears. Tony Peels inched closer, palms clasped on the surface, clear of the exposed contents. Times are shifting, Mr. Johnson. You're more aware of that than most. The kids these days, they're done with lotteries. No more interest in gambling slips or wagering syndicates. They're craving harder stuff, something to erase the war in Vietnam, the grind of hardship, the whole mess. They're after heroin. Bumpy's face remained impassive. He lifted his cup for another swallow, grip unwavering. Tony pressed on, motioning toward the yawning case. He indicated the piles of cash. The case rested conspicuously between them, its contents in orderly heaps, secured by those bands. Bumpy noted the markings on the uppermost notes. Benjamin's, authentic wealth, weighty capital, a windfall, sufficient to secure Dorothy's future indefinitely. Plenty for real estate, smart investments, a lasting mark outside the underworld, enough for an easy exit from life. Yet Bumpy Johnson had never chased ease in his final days. Paulie, the rookie, couldn't hold his tongue. Reckless youth and hubris, Bumpy mused. A real hazard, a potent mix. Mr. Johnson, with due respect, you're no longer in your prime. You've enjoyed a solid career, 3 decades leading the pack. Few guys achieve that. What's the point of resisting? Grab the cash, savor your remaining days, stick around to watch your grandkids mature. This deal's happening regardless of your involvement. Consider this our nod to a true icon. That's when Bumpy's gaze moved from Tony over to Paulie. The air in that booth chilled instantly, dropping like 10 degrees. Dorothy, topping off water at a nearby table, sensed the shift. The patrons around them picked up on it too. Even Tony Peels noticed. He extended a hand to steady Paulie's arm, but it was too late. How old might you be, kid? Bumpy's tone stayed calm, almost chatty. Paulie sat up straighter, attempting to appear formidable, fighting the urge to reveal how Bumpy's intense look was twisting his gut. 25? 25? Bumpy inclined his head gradually, as though pondering the figure. Do you realize my age when I stepped into Lucky Luciano's office in Manhattan and declared Harlem off-limits without my say-so? Paulie stayed silent. He had no clue. 29. 4 years your senior. Care to guess Lucky's response? He called me insane, branded me a doomed soul, claimed his syndicate would squash me flat. That unfolded in 1935, 33 years back. Bumpy halted briefly. Yet here I stand, alive and rooted in Harlem. Lucky? He passed in Italy, exiled back in 1962. Heart failure, much like the condition that'll eventually claim me. His eyes returned to Tony. And where's Vado Genovese these days, Tony? Tony Peels fidgeted in his seat. He's He's locked up in federal custody, Mr. Johnson. You already know. Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, heart issues mirroring mine. Fading just like me. Bumpy's grin held no kindness. Isn't it ironic? We devote our existence to clashing with rivals, only for our own bodies to betray us in the finish. Tony attempted to steer the talk back. Mr. Johnson, no one's slighting your legacy. We're aware of your achievements, what you've constructed, but eras evolve. The traditional methods, the old rules, they no longer... The traditional methods. Bumpy's words remained soft, yet they sliced sharp as a blade. You believe this proposal is fresh to me? Think I haven't encountered such tactics previously? Heroin isn't novel, Tony. It's been pressing against Harlem's gates since the 1920s post-World War I and resurfaced after World War II. Each instance, I barred it firmly. Know the reason? Tony offered no reply. I've witnessed the devastation firsthand. It ravaged Chinatown during the 30s. It gutted districts in Chicago. It transformed lives into shambling shells. And I vowed to this area that while I drew breath, that toxin wouldn't surge unchecked through Harlem. He extended his arm over the table and snapped the briefcase shut. The clasps locked with a decisive snap. Then he slid it toward Tony, the motion grating across the surface. The noise reverberated through the hushed eatery. I reject your funds, and I refuse to let your toxin infiltrate my streets. Joey Surprise piped up from his spot by the entrance, his delivery firmer than Tony's. Come on, Bumpy, let's be practical. You can't halt this alone. You're just one individual. We represent a full network, with enforcers, ties, officials in our pockets. What's on your side? Some aging lottery operators and a name from the past. Bumpy glanced at Joey, then Tony, then the youthful Paulie. For the first instant since they arrived, a smile crossed his face. Not a welcoming one. Not cordial. It was the expression of someone who'd faced mortality repeatedly and held no fear. The look of a soul at ease with fate. Allow me to explain a bit about Harlem, Bumpy declared, his delivery firm and resolute, even as a constriction started forming in his torso. You view it as mere territory, another territory to plunder, another profit source? He negated with a gradual shake. Harlem embodies a commitment from those who erected it through sheer effort, a commitment to migrants from the South seeking liberty and discovering it within these bounds, a commitment to the youth navigating these avenues that alternatives exist beyond illegality, beyond narcotics, beyond self-ruin, to enrich suited executives in city centers. He gestured toward the sealed case. Introduce that filth to Harlem, and you're peddling more than substances. You're peddling demise. You're peddling despair. You're snatching promising youths, potential physicians, attorneys, educators, trailblazers, figures poised to reshape society, and molding them into junkies and fatalities. Tony Peels squirmed again. Mr. Johnson, we're operators in trade. We can't control personal decisions. You're killers. Bumpy's pitch stayed even, yet it dominated the space. Dorothy fumbled a utensil behind the counter. The drop rang out like thunder. Spare me the polish of terms like commerce and selection. You're killers. You distribute venom. You shatter households. You dismantle enclaves. And you expect me to clasp hands and aid your endeavor? The ache in his torso ignited then. Bumpy sensed it building. A constriction, a squeeze, as if an unseen force was gradually... A clamp squeezed his chest tighter. His left arm prickled with numbness. He knew the warning signals all too well. He'd witnessed guys succumb to heart seizures in the past. His father had gone the same route, grasping at his torso amid the cotton rows in South Carolina back in 1922. He understood what lay ahead, yet he still had words to deliver. "Here's my response to your offer," Bumpy declared, meeting the stare of everyone there. First Tony, next Joey, then the kid Paulie, who dropped his eyes and glanced aside. "You'll haul your heroin into Harlem only over my corpse. And even after that, the folks I've guided, the principles I've embodied, they'll resist you at every turn. You'll never dominate Harlem, not like you do Little Italy or the Bronx, not as long as a single soul recalls what I represented." The agony intensified. It stabbed deeper. Drawing breath grew harder. But Bumpy Johnson had one final message. 7 words that would echo through Harlem for the following 50 years. 7 words that would serve as his lasting legacy. He bent ahead, his gaze fixed on Tony Peels, and uttered, "Harlem doesn't bow. Not now. Not ever." The torment slammed into him like a mallet against his ribcage. Bumpy's palm shot to his heart, clutching the fabric of his shirt. His mug of coffee tumbled from his grasp and crashed onto the ground, dark brew pooling over the patterned floor tiles like spilled blood. From behind the counter, Dorothy let out a shriek. "Quote, twin?" Before anybody could react, the eatery's entrance flew open with a bang. 4 figures strode inside, towering guys, Harlem locals. Big Jack Turner headed the group, his 6'4" build blocking the frame. Trailing him were Raymond Slim Washington, Marcus the Deacon Williams, and a youthful tough named Cleveland, who handled protection for Bumpy's numbers rackets. They'd kept watch from the opposite side of the road the entire duration. They'd spotted the Italians entering. They'd lingered in readiness, and upon catching sight of Bumpy seizing his chest via the glass, they charged over. Big Jack's focus shifted from Bumpy heaving for oxygen to the trio of Italians in the opposite seat, to the dark satchel resting midway on the surface. "What have you done to him?" Big Jack's tone carried frozen fury, lethal intent. Tony Peels blanched. His palms rose on reflex, palms out to signal he carried no weapon, no threat. Quote, 23. Quote, 24. Big Jack advanced, his enormous fists clenching. Quote, 25. That's when Tony Peels grasped it. Joey surprised too, and young Paulie, whose smirk had twisted to sheer panic in mere seconds. The truth of events held no weight. Bumpy's age at 62 with his weakened ticker didn't factor in. This crisis might have struck today regardless of their presence. Perception ruled. Appearance defined it. 3 Italian gangsters across from Bumpy Johnson during his collapse in Harlem, surrounded by onlookers in a district that revered him like kin. They'd get ripped to shreds before help arrived. Joey's surprise edged toward the exit, satchel still clutched. Paulie's fingers twitched toward his coat, aiming for his piece. But Big Jack snagged his arm in a vice-like hold. "Draw that shooter, kid, and you won't exit this block. Not any of you. Come sundown, 3 corpses will bob in the East River." Amid the torment, the pressure grinding his torso, the labored gasps, Bumpy forced out words. His tone was a faint rasp. Yet, in the stunned hush of Wells' restaurant, all caught it. "Let them leave." Big Jack glanced down, puzzled and furious. "Boss, let them leave." Bumpy's breaths came in harsh bursts now, every syllable a battle. Quote, 30. He stared straight at Tony Peels, pinned in the bench, paralyzed by fear to budge or remain. Quote, 31. Big Jack let go of Paulie's arm. He retreated, clearing an escape route, though his glare vowed retribution on any return. Tony Peels snatched the satchel off the table. Proof, testimony, trouble. The three Italians didn't stroll. They bolted, Joey gripping the case, Paulie and Tony in pursuit. Through the door to their Cadillac, engines roaring as they peeled away, desperate to flee Harlem. They fled not from Bumpy, but from the fury of a whole community, from the certainty that Bumpy's passing with them nearby would pin the fault on them, and Harlem would hunt them down. Every corner, every back street, every ledge, safety would vanish. Better to bolt, better to vanish. Inside Wells' restaurant, Dorothy knelt by Bumpy, clasping his hand, sobs tracing her cheeks. Big Jack bellowed for a call to the hospital. Diners clustered close, some weeping, some murmuring prayers. Bumpy glanced toward Dorothy and mustered a gentle, authentic grin. "Tell her," he murmured softly. "Tell her I'm regretful for skipping lunch." Those proved to be his final words. Precisely at 8:52 a.m. on July 7th, 1968, Bumpy Johnson's heart finally failed, just 5 minutes following his session with the Genovese family delegates. 5 minutes after rejecting the $100,000 offer. 5 minutes after prioritizing integrity above mere existence. He passed away right there in his favorite booth at Wells' restaurant, where he'd savored Saturday breakfasts for 2 decades straight. He left this world encircled by his neighborhood folks, by those familiar with him, who held him in high regard, who cherished him deeply. He departed unbound, uncompromised, unyielding. The memorial service occurred 5 days afterward at Abyssinian Baptist Church on 138th Street. Over 5,000 individuals showed up to honor him. The queue wound along 6 blocks on 7th Avenue. Folks who'd never crossed paths with Bumpy, those acquainted only through tales, those whose elders had shared accounts of the figure who safeguarded Harlem. They all gathered to bid farewell. The Italian syndicate, staying true to their nature, attempted to encroach right after Bumpy's passing. For roughly 6 months, they flooded Harlem with heroin, assuming the ruler had fallen and the seat of power lay vacant. They miscalculated. The veteran crew, the lottery operators who'd collaborated with Stephanie St. Clair and Bumpy from the 1930s onward, the neighborhood managers who recalled the protocols, the grassroots coordinators who'd absorbed lessons from observing Bumpy, balanced the straight world in the shadows. They held on to his legacy. They recalled his stance. They echoed his declaration, "Harlem never yields." Yet reality stings, and chronicle calls for candor. Bumpy's demise indeed left a void, and voids invite chaos. In the ensuing years, emerging operators who forgot Bumpy's guidelines, who hadn't gathered at his feet to grasp the line between claiming necessities and ravaging one's own turf, began importing heroin into Harlem on a grander scale. They convinced themselves they stood apart. They believed their cunning would prevail. They imagined they could manage it, confine it, reap benefits from it without gutting the area. They erred gravely. The heroin scourge that Bumpy had battled until the end arrived regardless. Across the 1970s and stretching into the 1980s, Harlem endured profound anguish. Households shattered. Youths turned to addiction. The dread Bumpy had labored to avert materialized fully. But chronicles often overlook this nuance, and figures fail to convey it. The struggle intensified precisely because of Bumpy. The Italian outfit never dominated Harlem as they did Little Italy, the Bronx, or sections of Brooklyn. Indigenous players preserved a degree of independence. The locals clung to the knowledge of an alternative path, even when embodying it proved elusive. And during the epidemic's fiercest phase, as crack cocaine surged in the 1980s, Harlem still harbored residents mindful of Bumpy Johnson's defiance. They called upon his legacy. They urged the younger generation, "We once had a figure who refused. We once had a sovereign who valued ethics above gain. We once had a guide who'd perish before forsaking his people." That recollection carried weight. It endures today. Tony Peels safeguarded that sleek black leather valise throughout his remaining days. He left it sealed after that fateful moment. He never banked the funds. He never touched a penny. The $100,000 remained precisely as bundled that morning, identical bank wrappers, same packets, undisturbed. He stored it in a vault in his Queens basement. Now and then, when aspiring gangsters sought his counsel, his insights, his yarns from bygone eras, he'd retrieve the case, unlatch it, and reveal the cash. Quote, 35, he'd declare, gesturing to the orderly piles of currency. This is the fallout from dishonoring a monarch. This is the result of imagining wealth conquers all. Bumpy Johnson lay on his deathbed. We dangled a vast sum before him, yet he elected death over acceptance. He'd snap the lid shut and secure it once more. Quote, 37. Tony Peels succumbed to lung cancer in 1987. His son, Anthony Jr., discovered the valise in the basement vault post-burial. He unfastened it, beheld the funds, still bundled, notes faded to yellow but whole, and spotted a scrawled message slipped within. Quote, 38. The valise and its holdings were purportedly contributed incognito to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in 1988. The institution refrains from formal acknowledgement, yet long-time keepers will discreetly affirm, amid the collections lurks a black leather case holding $100,000 in 1968-era bills, a tribute to the occasion when a fading soul uttered refusal. Wells Restaurant shuttered in 1982, a casualty of evolving districts and escalating leases. Prior to demolishing the structure for a parking lot, a collective A group of folks from Harlem arranged for a modest brass marker to be crafted. They affixed it to the spot on the wall that once held Bumpy's favorite booth just hours before the demolition team showed up. It hung there for merely 24 hours until the structure was torn apart. Yet a snapshot was snapped, and that image spread across Harlem, with the inscription on the marker recited, committed to memory, and shared through generations. It simply stated, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, 1905 to 1968, the individual who refused to yield. Right here, he valued dignity above existence. Even now, strolling the streets of Harlem, his name echoes on. Elders perched on front steps, shuffling dominoes, sipping Java. They recount tales of the day Bumpy stared down Lucky Luciano and emerged unscathed, or how he quelled an uprising with one bold motion, or that fateful dawn when he confronted the Italian syndicate and uttered his refusal right to the end. The accounts aren't always spot on. Elements blur together, sequences tangle, myths merge with reality. Still, the core truth endures. Harlem once boasted a ruler who couldn't be swayed by bribes, a figure who put his neighborhood ahead of personal ease, someone who demonstrated to everyone that certain values outweigh riches, surpass authority, eclipse even survival. That's the enduring mark of Bumpy Johnson, not his involvement in betting rings, nor the brutality, nor the illicit domain he commanded. It's that pivotal instant where he weighed lingering in luxury for a bit longer against perishing for his convictions. He opted to perish upright. Through that decision, he revealed to Harlem, to all of us, the true nature of fortitude. Not the power to inflict harm, not the might to amass fortunes, but the resolve to refuse when the crowd anticipates surrender. The resolve to pick the tough path of integrity over the simple route of error. The resolve to embody unwavering ethics in a society that prizes concessions. On July 7, 1968, Bumpy Johnson's heart ceased its rhythm. Yet his message reverberated onward. Harlem refuses to submit. Not then, not today. And after 56 years, those sentiments retain their power. They continue to motivate. They keep urging us that options exist, that we hold control, that we needn't settle for the status quo. We can emulate Bumpy. We can rise tall. We can declare refusal. We can prioritize conviction over mere endurance, no matter the price. If this tale of bravery and unyielding integrity resonates with you, give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe. Pass it along to a friend who could use a nudge that integrity counts in an era that's lost sight of its value. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Would you have taken the same stand as Bumpy? Tell us, and enable alerts for additional hidden chronicles of Harlem's iconic figures.